We're TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau.
So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's CBMA Importer Claims System, Your Questions Answered webinar. I'm Jennifer Hill, Program Manager of TTB's Office of Industry and State Outreach. Chris Tiemann from our Regulations and Rulings Division will be kicking off today's webinar with a quick CBMA overview. Following that, our panel of experts will be answering questions that we received prior to today's webinar. Thank you to those who sent those in, as well as any of the questions that are posed today by the audience. As Chris provides his overview, we encourage everyone to ask those questions using the Q&A box within Zoom. So you can find that at the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. We will try to get to all the questions today, but if we do run out of time and you have a question that we weren't able to answer, please submit those through the RRD contact form, which you can find at the bottom of the CBMA imports page on ttb.gov. All of our CBMA related FAQs can also be found on our CBMA imports page, and we are continuing to create new FAQs from common questions received both from the webinars that we've been holding, as well as any questions that have been submitted through RRD or to any of our email inboxes. So like I mentioned, Chris Tiemann will be kicking off today's webinar. Joining him today, we have Sarah Rothman and Laura Hills from our Office of Chief Counsel, Patty Baynard and Tanya Geis from our Permit and Taxation Office, John Pica from our Tax Audit Division, and Jesse Longbreak from our Regulations and Rulings Division. I think I got everybody. So with that, again, I want to thank you all for joining today, and I will turn things over to Chris, who I think has a presentation he's going to share to start. Oh, Chris, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks everyone for joining us today for the next in our series of CBMA imports webinars. The Importer Claims System has gone live, which we'll discuss. And we're happy to have this opportunity to provide some little bit more information, as well as answer questions that we've been receiving and that we're already receiving in today's webinar. So again, please use the Q&A box, and we'll dedicate most of the time of this webinar to answering questions as they come in. I am going to start with a brief presentation, just to give a little bit of an overview for those of you who might be new to the webinars of CBMA, and also give everyone a chance to kind of submit their questions as we're going through some of the initial comments. So as always, we have to start with our TTB disclaimer, and the information presented today is to help the public understand and comply with the laws and regulations that TTB administers. We're not intending to establish any new or change any existing definitions, interpretations, standards, or procedures regarding those laws and regulations. In addition, the presentation may be made obsolete by changes in laws and regulations, and please consult the applicable laws and regulations for the most current requirements. We don't have any sample documents in this presentation. So again, I'm just going to give a little bit of an update of CBMA and the Importer Claims System. I'm going to highlight a few of the frequently asked questions that we posted, and then we're going to talk a little bit about authorizations for using the system, and then move on to the questions and answers. So just a brief overview again to remind everyone where we are. So the CBMA is the law that provides for reduced tax rates or tax credits for beer, wine, and distilled spirits. And those are limited in quantity on an annual basis for every producer, including foreign producers. So both domestic and foreign producers have those quantity limitations. Foreign producers, again, as you know, utilize these benefits by assigning them to U.S. importers of their products. And those U.S. importers pay the federal excise tax on imported beer, wine, and distilled spirits to CBP when products are entered into the country. The foreign producers register and make assignments of reduced rates in the myTTB system. And as of today, we have 10,257 active foreign producer registrations, and that number continues to increase. So as of this January 1st, importers have been required to pay the full rate of tax, subject to any applicable wine or flavor tax credits for distilled spirits, to CBP at the time of entry. And to take advantage of those reduced rates, the importer must file a claim using the electronic system with TTB. And importers may file refund claims after the close of each calendar quarter covering entries in that previous quarter. An importer can only claim refunds on imports where the foreign producer has assigned their CBMA tax benefits to the importer using the myTTB online system. And importers then file quarterly refund claims. That system went live on the beginning of April. They can file claims based on the CBMA tax benefits assigned to them after the imported products have entered into the United States for consumption, and after the importer has paid to CBP the tax due on those products at full tax rate. And that's an important note. We've received a number of questions from domestic producers who might have imported their products in bulk and then bottled them in the United States and paid the tax to TTB. This system does not apply to taxes that are paid to TTB, in which case the tax can just be paid at the lower rates. This importer claim system only applies to tax that has been paid to CBP at the time of entry. And again, the calendar quarter must end before CBMA refund claims may be filed for any consumption entries made during that quarter. And those claims must be made electronically using the myTTB system. So we have a website that we've set up. I always like to promote it because it has lots of information. We keep it updated very frequently with questions and answers that we're posting. Additionally, all of the videos, the webinar series that we've been posting, they are on the TTB YouTube page. They can also be linked from this page. We have some user guides for each of the systems, as well as some important information that we think is useful for filing your claims and registrations. I will note that I think last week we did post the last walkthrough video of the importer claim system that we produced. That video provides you step-by-step instructions on how to file each claim. And it also provides instructions on returning assignments if necessary. So you can find a link to that on our CBMA imports page. So on that page, we did recently post a couple of new frequently asked questions that I thought I would just highlight. The first one, we've been receiving some questions about how importers that file in ACE in proof liters or liters, how they can convert those to the quantities that are listed in myTTB as the assignments from the foreign producers. So you can find on our CBMA imports page the conversion factors for distilled spirits, wine, and beer. That should help you when converting from liters to gallons or barrels. We also posted a question about industry members who would like to receive their refund as a check, but the mailing address is incorrect. You can't update that mailing address directly in the myTTB system. So if you have an account in Permits Online, you should update the mailing address information in Permits Online to receive checks. Users that do not have a Permits Online account, so those are with a TTB reference number, which is a pretty rare occurrence, you'll need to contact TTB to correct that mailing address. But note that it is quicker and you wouldn't have to worry about an address if you use direct deposit as your refund option. Finally, I'm not going to get into too much detail on this new frequently asked question, but I wanted to point out that there is information and an answer on the TTB CBMA imports page. What should a foreign producer do if they receive a letter from TTB stating that a foreign producer is a member of a controlled group that has assigned more CBMA tax benefits than is permitted by law? So we are beginning to send out information about those. So if that applies to you or you have questions about it, feel free to check out that FAQ number FP13 on the CBMA imports page. So just a reminder, when you're filing your foreign producer registrations or making assignments or filing your importer claims, you'll do that all through the my.ttb.gov page. There is a panel there for the CBMA imports. User guides are there as well, and we'll continue to provide training materials as necessary and updates. So when using the myTTB system, one of the most important things to be able to access it is the authorization system. And we've been receiving a number of questions about that. So I'd like to ask my colleague, Tanya Geist, to give some information about authorizations for myTTB.
Thank you so much, Chris. So yes, the first important thing to know is that the key contact that you have listed in the Permits Online system or panel must be an owner or officer with signing authority, and there must be a valid email address associated with that key contact. If we don't have an email address in panel or the key contact isn't an owner or officer, that email address is where the activation code and the invitation code is going to be mailed. So if we don't have a valid email address, of course, you won't receive that email. So that's the first thing to check. And then the key contact must use the activation code and the email that they receive, but it must be the key contact that uses that code. So please, if you are a key contact, do not forward that activation email to anyone else. You as the key contact must go in to the system, click on that code, and activate the entity. And then once you do that, you can then go in as key contact and assign someone else to be an entity manager, someone that has signing authority, or maybe the person that's going to be responsible for the claims. The key contact can make them an entity manager and assign a role to them to be able to submit claims. So, once that initial activation is done, the key contact never has to go back in there again. So we just want to caution you to make sure that you're not forwarding those emails to anyone else to activate. If that's happening, and some of you may have already experienced this, you may get a call from us or an email from us that is letting you know that, hey, you're a key contact, but you aren't an owner officer, and we're going to be removing your authorization. If you receive that email and you need more information, of course, you can contact the call center, and we can help you with how to get the key contact established in there as the entity manager.
Great. And Tanya, we actually received a question in advance as well, asking about some of the internal key contact issues that are currently popping up with different people that might have power of attorney or signing authority. Can you talk a little bit more about those issues?
Yes, the key contact, the reason that we require the key contact in panel to be an owner officer is because we want to be able to have someone we can contact that's affiliated, that's going to be affiliated with the company long term. So, if you have a consultant or you have someone with just power of attorney, that person the power of attorney can be revoked, a consultant can be changed. So that's why we're requiring the key contacts to be owner officers. And we are updating that if we see that somebody is listed incorrectly as a key contact and is not an owner officer. So those are being deleted from panel. And again, you will probably get an email if you've already activated the entity as a key contact that isn't an owner officer. Your entity manager status will be deleted. And that requirement has been in effect since, I believe, when Permits Online, the version 5, when that was first released, that is when the requirement went into effect that a key contact must be an owner officer. Does that answer your question, Chris? I believe that was the nature of that inquiry that we received before the webinar.
And I just happened to notice while we're on this topic, just in the Q&A box, looks like someone's been having trouble gaining access to the system because the key contact didn't have an email registered, and they added an email, but it's been in review in Permits Online. Is there any other way to get access or expedite that process, or is it just a matter of waiting for the Permits Online system to be updated?
Yes, we can absolutely check on that and get that added. Just refer to, I don't know, Chris, if you have the call center contact us page featured in here. Yes, perfect. It's almost like I knew the next slide. Please reach out to our National Revenue call center using this contact form link and just explain that you added your email address to panel and you're waiting for it to be approved, and we can go in there and expedite that request for you. Absolutely. Just make sure that you give us your EIN, your permit number, and your company name.
Thanks so much, Tanya. And yeah, while we have that contact information page up, I'll just refer you for any questions that you have about CBMA in general. Please feel free to reach out. You can call the number there or use the contact form. Sometimes the contact form is even easier for us to be able to get back to and do the research on the question, as well as tracking them for our frequently asked questions, although we do track the telephone questions as well. So you can find that information on our CBMA Imports webpage as well at the bottom of the page if you need to reach us and contact us. I see someone has a raised hand, but I don't think we have the functionality set up to call on people. So if someone has a question, we encourage you to put it in the Q&A box. That would be the best way to reach us. And so that concludes the prepared remarks, and we do have a bunch of questions popping up in the Q&A box. So I will stop sharing my screen. And the first one I wanted to check on. So Laura, if someone has different IT-related issues when they're trying to work on their registrations or importer claims, what's the procedure for addressing IT-related issues?
Yeah, and Tanya actually just highlighted the slide that you had up with our contact information. So I just add again that number does go to our help desk, and there's also a form on our website. That's Chris put up that slide again. Put the slide on Chris put up that slide, and then it's also on our website at the bottom of the importer page. There's a green box with the contact us. So if there's issues, thanks Chris. If there's issues about specific problems that you're having or general IT issues that you want to make sure that we're aware of, use that contact information, and then we can make sure that those are routed correctly and to the right people to make sure that we're seeing those and can do what we can to fix them.
Thanks. I wanted to throw this question over to John. If someone is trying to find versus Q1 versus Q2 claims, looks like some people are having trouble when they try and load the Q2 claims, it only reloads Q1. Can you talk a little bit about the Q1 versus Q2 claims and how that should work?
Yeah, sure. At this point, Q2 shouldn't be available. I think there was a time when you could actually select Q2, but I thought that was fixed and made not available at this point, but perhaps it's still there. So yeah, not until Q2 is over will you start to be able to file a Q2 claim, similar to the way Q1 showed up after the end of the quarter. If you don't see anything at all, even though you feel like you have data filed in Q1, you don't see any Q1 anything, I think someone mentioned, there's a few reasons for that. If you log in and you see nothing, it's either because there's no permit or we didn't receive a valid permit on the records that were imported from customs and going into our live system, or there were some import dates outside of the scope of that quarter, or no import date at all, and an enter date that was outside of the scope of that quarter.
Got it. And Tanya, after a claim is assigned, when should importers expect to receive the money to be deposited? And will there be an email or other notification from TTB?
So right now, we don't have an actual date that we can give you. Like, we can't say it's going to be 1 week or 2 weeks because it does take time if you request a check to cut those checks. And of course, if you request ACH, you're going to get your refund a little faster. But I just wanted to let you guys know that when you see the status of your claim change to completed, that it will let you know that your claim has been processed and has moved on to the next step, where it is then transmitted over to our revenue accounting section for payment. And once that claim has been paid, you will see an update to that completed status that will show paid. So once you see that status on your claim, you know that that payment is on its way to you. So it's good to check in on those statuses, and that kind of lets you know where the claim is in that process.
Thanks. And I will add, just for everyone's knowledge, that interest begins to accrue after 90 days after the claim is filed. So we definitely endeavored to get them done before that time, but with expectations that it's usually much faster. Sarah, so if someone wants to file a claim, and what information is the minimum that they have to provide? Is the TTB number sufficient? Do we need to specify the tax rate that they're claiming?
Well, our system relies on a bunch of different data that the importers will submit in ACE. So the importer permit number in the TTB message set in ACE is one of those data elements, but also we'll need the foreign producer ID number in the ACE data, along with various codes and other information about the specific tax rate that's going to be claimed. The instructions for doing that are in the KTAR, which is linked to from our FAQ page.
Thanks. And I talked a little bit earlier about bulk imports. Jesse, if someone is importing bulk wine, how does the tax for that work?
Right. So on an importation of bulk wine, that'll need to be released in bond without payment of tax, at which point, because you're not paying the tax, you're not going to be able to file a claim for refund of tax on the importation itself. The domestic company that's receiving that wine in bond and then bottling and bringing that to market may be able to take the CBMA rates on that wine so long as they further produce the wine. And we do have guidance on our website about what qualifies as production in that capacity. There's under our CBMA, domestic CBMA information, we have a series of FAQs. There's FAQ TRW8 that goes into detail on what qualifies as production.
Thinking a little bit about customs brokers, John, can you talk about how it might work if someone uses several customs brokers to file entry summaries?
Yeah, that should be seamless. Like I said, the main thing is if you have your permit number on the entry and it is fed over our systems, when you log in, you'll see things that are tied to your permit number. So it shouldn't really matter what broker you've used, as long as all the CBMA fields and the permit number and the import and entry dates are all available.
Thank you. And I saw someone ask for a video of a full claim from beginning to end. And we actually just posted a walkthrough of the system. It does show you all the steps of filing a claim. So you can find that video on the TTB's YouTube page, which can be linked also from the CBMA imports page. So check that out. Tanya, an attendee asked about manual claims. Are they being assigned yet? And what's the status of manual claims?
So for those of you that have filed manual claims, you know the process is a little bit different. Those claims are filed through our system, but you have to support your claim with a spreadsheet that you fill in and other supporting documents. So we have shifted our priority over to those manual claims at this point, and those will be assigned. Probably you'll start to see those being assigned out. I'm going to say probably as early as next week. So again, check back on the status for that. We had to come up with a way to receive your attachments and associate those with your claim, and that's been done. So I'm going to say that probably early to mid next week, you'll see those being assigned out.
Thanks. And just to clarify for the audience, a manual claim is basically if there's some particular reason that the claim is not available to be filed just through the normal automated process. We do have an industry circular that provides details, but it's definitely the more complex procedures. So we encourage you, in fact, I think you're required to use the automated process when the claims are able to be filed through the normal procedures. Laura, can we touch back on filing claims for different quarters? If there's extra entries that weren't filed for Q1, can those be batched with Q2, or how will that work?
Hi, yeah, we've received a few of these questions and some are popping up in the answered column as well. So our system is designed so that Q1 claims are grouped together, Q2 claims are grouped together. So you cannot combine Q1 and Q2 entries. However, if you miss filing, in the immediate months following Q1, the ultimate deadline for filing a CBMA refund claim is generally 3 years from the time you file the tax return, which in this case would be the time that an importer pays tax to CBP. That's treated as a tax return under our regulations. So generally you'll have 3 years from that date to file a claim. So while it's done by calendar quarter, if you miss something in the first quarter, you don't have to panic and then worry about trying it into the second quarter. It's still grouped by quarter. And then we also had a question about how far back can we go to file claims. And just to clarify that TTB started handling this refund program beginning with entries on January 1st, 2023. So any entries where the claim is based on a foreign producer assignment before January 1st, 2023, those would still be handled by CBP.
Thanks. So a question about if there's just a small amount of allocation left. John, can you speak to that if someone has maybe, 1 gallon or less left to be claimed?
Yeah, it's really the same way it's been in the past with filing with CBP. So everything's done at the entry line level. So if you have a small amount, it would exist on its own entry line level. So sometimes you go between tiers, sometimes you're just at the top of a CBMA rate tier, but that just needs to be on its own line with the right rate designation code, and it should just flow through the system.
Jesse, a question came in about errors showing as no import date. Looks like there were some tax payments that were taken advantage of in 2022. So can you talk a little bit about those entries for where the tax benefit was taken for 2022? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the thing I want to focus on here, my understanding of this question, and feel free the submitter, feel free to resubmit if I'm misunderstanding. But it appears that all these are entries from 2022. So going back to what Laura was mentioning a few moments ago, TTB's administration of the reduced rates does not begin until entries on January 1st, 2023 or later. So if all these entries that lacked an import date in ACE actually occurred, the consumption entries actually occurred in 2022, that relates back to CBP's administration of the CBMA import rates.
Thanks. It looks like there are some more questions about key contacts. Tanya, so if someone has a power of attorney from the owner of the company, they still can't be designated as the key contact, right? Only owners and officers. Can you reiterate a little bit about that?
Yes, that is correct. So only an owner officer can be listed as a key contact in panel. And I just want to reiterate that that owner officer, that key contact, they can go in, activate the entity, and then they are able to assign the entity manager status to another user that has POA at that point. So a POA can be an entity manager. It's just that that key contact has to activate the entity and then assign that entity manager status out to someone else. So, but as I want to just restate, the key contact must be an owner officer and must be the one to do that part of the process.
Thank you. And Tanya, we also received a question in advance that had wanted a little bit more information about how to return allocations. We haven't really touched on that. Can you touch on some of that?
Yes, allocations can be returned in the claims system. So you'll want to log into the system and you'll go into the main area where you're going to prepare a claim, and you'll see all of your assignments that have been assigned to you as an importer from all of the foreign producers. Right next to each one of those assignments, there's a return. It's not a button, but it's a link, sort of like a breadcrumb, I guess. And you would click on that link, that return link, and once you do that, a screen will pop up and it will ask you if you want to return the full assignment, meaning the entire assignment will be returned, or if you just want to return a part of that assignment back to the foreign producer. So you have an option to do either or. It'll ask you to, if you want to return a partial amount, it'll ask you how much, and then you hit enter, and it'll ask you to confirm what you entered, and that's how you return the assignment. That assignment would then go directly back to the foreign producer, and they can reassign it to another importer at that point.
More questions coming in about key contacts and entity managers. So if TTB has revoked someone as an entity manager because they were not a key contact, can that key contact, such as the owner, can they reinstate you as an entity manager again?
Absolutely. That if that entity manager status has been revoked, the key contact can then go in and make another person a POA, someone with signing authority, an entity manager. So yes, absolutely. Once that key contact goes in, they can assign that entity manager status to whoever, yes, has signing authority.
And then there's also different statuses that users have in the system. If someone is, say, has the status of preparer, how can they change their status to be able to submit the claim?
The status can be updated. I'm trying to think. It is in the claim system. I believe you go into the manage entity. So when you go into the claim system on your dashboard, you'll see manage entity. Under the manage entities section, there's a manage permissions section. If you scroll down the screen, you'll see it towards the middle of the screen. Once you get to that manage permissions section, you'll see everyone listed that has a user role, whether it's submitter, prepare, or entity manager, and that's where you will select whichever role you want to update, revoke, or change. You'll click on that person's role, and then it'll open a screen where you can actually change that role from prepare to submitter. Now, I will say that if you want to update, say, a prepare to a submitter, you first have to delete the prepare role, and then add that person back and assign the submitter role to that person. So if you get an error when you're trying to just update that, just know that you have to delete the incorrect role and then re-add the correct role. But that is on the Manage Entity screen in the Manage Permissions section.
Thanks so much. And I noticed there's another participant with a raised hand, and we don't have that functionality set up. So if you do have a question, please submit it through the Q&A box, and we'll be able to check it out there. Thinking about some of the error messages, Sarah, there's an error message of invalid tax estimate. Can you talk a little bit about what the root causes might be of that error? And it looks like some people have tried to rectify it and have been unable to submit.
Sure. So starting in 2023, the full tax rate has to be paid to CBP as part of the consumption entry. So our system will do calculations to make sure that the amount that you paid to customs represents the full tax rate. So if these are distilled spirits and you paid at a lower effective tax rate based on a credit for eligible wine or flavor content, you need to make sure that you have a Y in the CBMA data elements under the flavor content credit indicator field. That's one reason why we may not be realizing that you've correctly paid the full tax rate to CBP. Otherwise, if you really can't figure it out and you think that there may be an error in our system, please go to the CBMA FAQ page, and there's a contact us form. You can give us more information about the specific entry that you're trying to claim, the error message you're receiving, and we can look into that.
Great. Speaking of errors, our system really relies on the data coming in from the ACE system. John, what information, if anything, does an industry member have to confirm prior to filing a claim?
They don't have to confirm anything in ACE, but I would definitely encourage people to run an ACE report, or if their brokers have in-house reports from their own systems, they can run a report there to review the information in ACE and make sure you have a permit, a good formatted permit associated with each line on the entry, and that the form producer IDs are what you expect, and that you know where there might be a blank import date. And you can actually, as a follow-up to Sarah's response, you can check to see your effective rates to see if they make sense. We do check against full rates, as Sarah mentioned, but because of the way ACE processes, it'll allow some very strange rates if it's a very small quantity, as long as it's within $3 of the total. And our system's not currently set up that way. It's just purely within a small variance of the actual effective rate. So it may be that ACE allowed it and we're not allowing it. And you can call us to get that figured out, or go through the web form with a question. But it may be that you just need to file those through the manual process otherwise.
And then if someone makes a correction in ACE, how much time does it usually take for that to then appear on TTB's systems?
Yeah, ideally, that should show up the next day. There are cases where the change is actually done by a CBP custom specialist. We might not receive that change at all. That's just the functionality of CBP and how they send us information, it comes from the filers, but we don't get changes made by CBP themselves. But yeah, normally I would expect it to come next day. And if you don't see it, then you can start reaching out to us and maybe we can look it up and see what's going on.
Great. I'm thinking a little bit about ownership. Jesse, if there's a U.S. importer that owns 100% of a foreign entity that would qualify as a producer of distilled spirits, is the foreign entity still a foreign producer, or does the fact that it has U.S. ownership change anything?
No, the foreign producer will still be able to essentially qualify for or have the ability to assign reduced rates to domestic importers. The one thing to be aware of about common ownership between foreign producers and domestic entities is between foreign producers and domestic producers. If you have a foreign producer that is fully owned by a domestic producer, in that case, they will share the quantity limitations on the reduced rates under the control group rules of the CBMA.
Thanks. And there's a slightly complex question about warehouse entries that I'm going to throw to John. The question is that the importer is showing entry numbers for entry withdrawals available for the claims. They are receiving an error that there is no arrival date. The arrival date is generated with the original warehouse entry. So should withdrawals entry numbers be linked together to generate the actual arrival of the goods, or should they have the actual warehouse entry number on the list of claims available to submit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for those, as we receive them in our system, there oftentimes, like you say, there is no arrival date, or what we also term the import date. So right now, the option really would be to file those under the manual claim process. So you can download those with ACE and then, yeah, pull forward the original warehouse entries arrival date and use that as the import date on these warehouse withdrawal entry numbers. Alternatively, when your broker files those warehouse withdrawals, they can put that import date in. To my knowledge, ACE does not restrict you from doing that. And we're talking with CVP to potentially have that as a requirement going forward.
Thanks. And then Laura, so if there are some entries accounted for in Q1 that did not appear in the system summary lines that the system automatically generated, is there any idea about why that might happen?
Yeah, so two possibilities could be that the C claim indicator needs to be in ACE as well as the correct permit number in ACE. So I would check those. And I also just wanted to point out that we've mentioned our website a lot. We do have user guides for claim filing, and those include some kind of like, troubleshooting. Like there's I think it's on page 10 maybe of that claims user guide. Like if your summary lines don't appear, check these things. There's also appendix at the end with descriptions of the error codes and what those mean. So that's a good resource as well on our website.
Yeah, definitely. Tanya, if someone wants to be an entity manager that's been assigned by the key contact, do they need to have a power of attorney?
No, they don't. So what happens when that key contact makes the assignment as an entity manager to someone, there's an attestation in the system that they check that basically says that the person that I'm assigning this entity manager status to, I am giving them authority to deal with the CBMA claims system. Now, again, that attestation only applies to anything that's happening in the CBMA claims system. So if that person needed to have authority to file tax returns or something else outside of CBMA, then a power of attorney will be required. But just to handle things, actions of the CBMA system, no.
And then we talked about different roles. Can the same person be both the preparer and the submitter in myTTB?
So a submitter, if someone has the role of submitter, that means they can both prepare and submit claims. A preparer can only prepare the claim, but cannot submit that claim to TTB for payment. So if you have that submitter role, you can actually do both automatically.
And Sarah, can you talk a little bit about how an importer can find out if a foreign producer has assigned some of the tax benefits to them?
Yes, so starting this year, foreign producers register with TTB and make their assignments electronically through the foreign producer registration and assignment system. And when they make those assignments, they enter the TTB importer permit number of the importer to whom they're making the assignment. So once you, the importer, log into myTTB, you can scroll down and see the CBMA assignment summary screen to look at all of the assignments that have been made to you for this calendar year.
Thanks. And Laura, I'm going to throw this one out to you, even though you didn't request it. I had talked a little bit earlier about interest and how it starts to accrue. Can you talk about exactly how those dates work again, and when the interest accrues, and if you have any more information to provide about that?
Yeah, so I know there can be concern about, how quickly TTB is processing claims. So if we take longer than 90 days, I think it might be at 90 days to process a claim and to issue a refund, then after that point, we will pay interest along with a refund given to that, and it accrues from when the claim is filed.
Going back to some of the system questions on our end, Tanya, if the status is assigned or awaiting assignment in the importer claim system, what do those mean? And then is there a reason why the payment address might be different when you do an automatic claim versus a manual claim?
So the difference between those two statuses, awaiting assignment means that we've received your claim, but it hasn't been assigned to anyone to process. The assigned, when you see that the other status, assignment, that assignment has been made, assigned to a specialist, that means that someone has actually is looking at your claim and it is in the process of being approved or approved. So that is the difference between those two statuses. Now, as far as the email address or the mailing address being different in a manual claim and an electronically submitted claim, that sounds a little odd to me. So if that is the case, if you're seeing two different addresses pop up, because those mailing addresses are supposed to are populated from Permits Online system. So unless you've had some type of change there, they should be the same. And if you see that happening, I would love for you to send us your information using that Contact Us form, so that we can just take a look at what that's looking like and what's happening. That could be a glitch in the system. So we'd like to just take a look and see what's going on there, and we can let you know.
And then a question about entity managers. Is it possible to have more than one entity manager on an account, Tanya?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There could be any number of entity managers that the key contact wants to assign out. So yes, that is possible.
Thank you. And then obviously the questioner asked if they had questions on that, who to contact. So yeah, reach out again to the TTB call center that we've been mentioning. Jesse, can an importer manage the foreign producer's assignments for them, or can a third party manage their assignments? And how do they make those authorizations for third parties or importers to do that?
Right, yeah, so a foreign producer can authorize essentially anyone to act on their behalf in the foreign producer registration and assignment system. The main thing to keep in mind is that the person being authorized needs to maintain proof of that authorization. And we do have on our CBMA imports page an FAQ about what qualifies as proof of authorization to act on behalf of the foreign producer.
Thanks. And sticking with you, Jesse, I've seen a number of questions come in talking about where they might have already filed a claim, but we're missing some of the entry lines or want to go back and claim additional entry lines. Can you talk a little bit about that and clarify that can industry members have more than one claim for a quarter? Any more information about that?
Yep, absolutely. So you can always file an additional claim if there are certain entry lines that are not yet ready for whatever reason when you first file your initial claim after that claim period closes. The other thing to keep in mind is when there are entries missing, when you've identified that there are entries missing in the importer claims portal, the first thing that you'll want to do is go back to your ACE data and make sure that everything is in there. All the information is in there and it's in there correctly. And once you've made an update to that information, those entries should populate in the claims portal, and then you'll be able to file your second or your third claim once those entries are available in the TTB portal. The manual claims process is reserved for a certain subset of issues that are essentially not correctable by the importer. So you really want to make sure that you go back and look at the ACE data, make sure that you are correcting it if you can, and then you'll be able to go through the normal procedures for filing your claims.
Thanks. Tanya, back to entity managers again. If someone is an entity manager, are they automatically able to submit as a submitter status?
So there is an update coming to the system that all entity managers will also be made submitters, but that update has not been released yet. So until that happens, and we are looking at that update to come out at the end of this month, but until that happens, the entity manager will actually have to go in and assign a role to themselves. So you aren't automatically assigned a submitter role until you go in and assign that role to yourself.
Thank you. And we were talking a little bit about the different statuses like assigned. I know that it's really hard to specify any specific timeframes as they really are so variable. But if someone sees that their claim has been assigned and it's been in that status for several days, is that a concern? Do you have any thoughts on timing for when there might be next steps taken on that claim, or is it really just variable?
I wouldn't be concerned if it's been in that assigned status for a few days, because it will stay in that status while it is being processed and while it's being pushed up the chain for review. So don't be concerned if you see that assigned status. Once it's been completed and sent over, ready to be sent over to be paid, that's when you'll see that completed status. So it's going to take a little bit to get it through the review chain, and I would just recommend checking back on those statuses. We can't really give say a time frame of when it's definitely going to be approved or paid out, but we are getting through those claims pretty quickly. And again, we do not want to hit that 90-day time frame for having to pay interest. So just keep checking those statuses, and you'll see movement.
Thanks. And then if someone receives their refund, Laura, and the amount is lower than expected, is there someone they should contact to find out why the amount might be lower, or a way to produce any additional information or documentation?
Yeah, so if the refund is lower than the amount you expected, there should be an explanation of that refunded amount and why there was an adjustment, along when you get that final action for claim back. There should be that explanation on there. And then after that, if you would have additional questions, I would suggest reaching out to Permitting and Taxation through that contact form. You may need to include your claim number so that it can be routed properly, but it should have an explanation on there to begin with. And then if there are additional questions after that, to follow up.
And John, we were talking about the C indicator earlier. Do you know what the name of the field is in ACE that needs to contain that C indicator?
Claim type code, I believe.
Thanks. Let's see, I'm trying to see. Is there any other questions that I have not asked anyone that someone wants? Here's one for Sarah. How and when do you submit a claim for a post-summary correction after they are filed?
Oh, well, the post-summary correction process is a CBP process, and I'm going to respond in the text with a link to the CBP website that'll explain how to file a post-summary correction. I think your broker should know how to do that. Once the ACE data is corrected via a PSC, TTB's system will receive the updated data, usually within a day, and then it'll allow you to file a claim through the automated system. If for some reason you can't correct all the required ACE data through a PSC, then you'll need to go to our website and look at the alternate filing method.
Thanks. And then Laura, looking at the producers, does the producer on the customs entry need to be exactly the same as the producer that assigns the CBMA allocation for the claim to be valid?
Yeah, so when the form producer registers with TTB and makes an assignment, they receive a TTB form producer ID number. And that ID number has to match with the information submitted in the claim to be valid. So we are comparing that the form producer with this ID number is the form producer that made the assignment. And that form producer ID number should also be.
Great. And Tanya, coming back to some payments, if the claim status says paying claim, do you know if there's a time frame at that point by which someone should receive their check or ACH deposit?
So when it's in the paying claim status, that means it has gone over to our revenue accounting section and has been on the transmittal. So it is now scheduled for payment. So again, I can't really say. It depends on if you receive if you ask for your refund back ACH, it's going to be a little quicker than if you ask for a check, but you will know when that claim has been paid, when that status changes to paid. So very soon. It should be very soon.
And then will the importer receive an email with the amount to be refunded?
There's no email that comes out that lets the importer know how much is being refunded. So when you submit a claim, the CBMA claims system keeps track of those submitted claims that has the amount on there. And once that claim is completed, you will see if there's any adjustments that have been made to that claim that will either lower or increase that amount. So all of that will be in your in the claim system on your account that you can refer back to, but there won't be an email that comes out to let you know how much that payment's going to be.
Thanks. Then there's a question about further production activities done in the United States on bulk spirits. So we have some information on our website about further production activities, but yes, if further production activities are done, in this case, they're talking about water and sugar, so check our website about which activities would qualify, but they would be considered as part of that domestic distilled spirits plant's CBMA quantities for the purposes of CBMA at reduced rates, as well as tax payments, and for they asked about the COLA as well, which is not a topic of this call, but the COLA would be filed also by that domestic bottler for spirits rectified in the United States. Let's see, we have just a couple minutes left. I thought I'd go ahead and ask my panel if there are any other questions that I haven't gotten to that they'd like to answer live before we run out of time.
There's just
Hey, this is John. I got a quick one. Oh, just real quick.
Go ahead,
I missed this earlier, where you can see beyond Q1 when you go in there. So if you can't see Q2 entries, you can't file that claim yet, obviously, but you should be able to see your current entry filings year to date if everything is lining up with your access and there is the C code. And someone did ask if there's is there a way current data can be visible even though it can't be filed yet? You were using that data to make sure that entries are correct on the front end at the time of entry so that you don't have to file a post-summary correction later. So that's kind of difficult. It comes in our system almost real time, kind of next day. So you'll be able to go in there and see what's there. But if it's missing a C code or a permit, you won't see it. It won't be linked to your account with any error codes or anything. So I would really suggest pulling reports from ACE, and that would probably give you the most real-time-ish. It's also a next day system, so or just working with a broker on different reports.
Thanks, John. And Tanya, did you have something to add?
Yes, there was a question on whether claims can be filed if the C code is missing from the ACE data. And the answer to that is yes, you can still file a claim on those entries. It just has to be that alternate method or manual claim that we were talking about a little bit earlier. And we do have instructions. There's a user guide on filing an alternate claim or manual claim. So if you check that CBMA, our CBMA section on our website and look for that user guide, there's step-by-step instructions on how to file claims for that particular reason.
Thank you very much. And I saw there were some different questions about processing time and number of claims. We don't have that data available publicly at this point. But please do keep an eye on our CBMA imports page. We are posting data that as we decide to release it. We also, again, have lots of user guides. So I've seen a few questions about exactly how step-by-step claims processing or power of attorney or different things work. Check that imports page. And if you don't have the website exactly, it's at the top of all the ttb.gov pages. And again, we'll post any videos there, walkthroughs, webinars, things like that. And you can also subscribe to TTB's YouTube page. I see one more question popped up for Tanya. If refund checks didn't arrive in the mail as expected, how can one request a reissue of the refund check?
So what you'll want to do is you'll definitely want to send us an email at that NRC contact us form. I was actually just typing a reply to that in the chat, so that's funny. Yeah, just send us your importer company name, your EIN, and your permit number, and we can check into whether that refund has been returned. Sometimes we get checks that are returned back to us that couldn't be delivered. So reach out to us using that NRC contact us form, and we'll check into it for you.
All right, thanks. Any final comments from the panelists?
Yeah, Chris, two things really quickly. Just to piggyback on one of Tanya's responses earlier about the C flag. If the C flag is missing, again, the first thing you're going to want to do is go back and see if you can update that via post-summary correction. You might not be able to, for example, if the entry is already liquidated, in which case you'll need to do the manual claim. But if a post-summary correction is available, go ahead and add that C flag through a post-summary correction, and then you'll be able to go through the regular claims process. Then there was a question about post-summary corrections for the TTB producer ID. I take that to mean the TTB importer permit number. The importer permit number is a unique case where it can't be updated via post-summary correction after the entry summary is filed. So that's, again, going to be a scenario where you're most likely going to have to go through the manual claims process.
Thank you. Jesse, would that be the same also if they need to update the form producer ID?
No, the form producer ID can be updated through a post-summary correction.
All right, great. Well, I think we're about out of time. If we did not have a chance to answer your question today, please feel free to submit it through our contact forms. It's been a pleasure hosting these CBMA Imports webinars over the past 6 months or so. So I hope you found them helpful, and feel free to rewatch them on our website. And to conclude, I'll pass it over to Jennifer Hill.
All right, like Chris said, thank you everybody for calling in today. And yes, please visit our CBMA Imports page for any and all updates. And then lastly, you will receive an email after this call with a survey. So please let us know what you thought of today's webinar and if there are any things you think we can do differently in the future. So with that, thank you to our panel and thank you to our audience. Everybody have a great day.
Visit TTB's official YouTube channel at USTTB.gov for more TTB-related content. And remember to click subscribe so you'll always know when we upload new videos.